I'd love to introduce you to the panel we have joining us here today, starting with Sean Hardy, who is the Director of National Strategy and Growth at Innovate Public Schools. Deon Gordon, who is the President and CEO of TechBirmingham. And joining us virtually, and you'll see her on screen, is Frazer, who is the founder and CEO of XR. I want to invite into the conversation first, starting with Kai, who's joining us virtually. If you'll just kick us off by telling us a little bit about your work, how you're leveraging technology, and again, it's so great to hear and know about you. So let's let the audience learn a little bit more about you, Kai.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for having me. Once again, my name is Frazer. I am a teacher by trade and now the founder and CEO of XR. My company, XR, we are a learning platform that increases classroom engagement by using future-facing technologies that kids know and love. So in the classroom, students are completing their lessons using VR field trips, metaverse makerspaces, game design challenges, and more. My company was based in Oakland, California for the last 5 years, and we recently moved to Birmingham, Alabama to be closer to our amazing students and teachers in the area. So thank you so much again for having me.
Thank you so much, Kai. Thank you for walking us through. Now I want to continue with Sean. Can you tell us a little bit more about your work, how Innovate Public Schools and really your background has helped identify what it is that is the important message for the community here by telling us about yourself?
My name is Sean Hardy. I love Kai's template. So I am originally a clinical social worker. I have my master's degree. Y'all better make me feel loved. Clinical social worker by profession, but I kind of found myself in this unlikely position of sliding into tech through our parent organizing and advocacy work. So as you mentioned, I work for Innovate Public Schools, and we're a 10-year-old national nonprofit focused on parent power building and advocacy. We do that through the vehicle of grassroots community organizing and civic participation training. In the work with the community, ChatGPT and Bing and Bard and all these new AI tech tools have come up, and parents have brought them to us, surprisingly. So we decided to do a little bit of exploring and figure out how do we allow parents to be at the center of the creation of these tools and not just simply the consumer of the tools.
Deon, I'd pass it to you as well. Can you tell us a little bit about your work, the organization, and the efforts?
Absolutely. First and foremost, thank you all for allowing me to share a space and the stage with you all. I'm the President and CEO of TechBirmingham. We serve as the convening voice, the tech association for Greater Birmingham, representing about 1.2 million residents. And so the mission is simple, what we want to do. Make sure people know about Birmingham, Alabama, and that we are really, I think, at the forefront of this technological revolution and just shouting that from the largest mountaintop that we can find. There's a perception issue about what takes place in Birmingham that we're trying to chip away against, which helps to have people like Frazer, who might not have come to Birmingham in the past, but now is helping us kind of lead the way. And then we also want to make sure that we serve as the convening voice. We have access to a lot of executives, whether they be in technology or associated industries and government on the state, local, and federal level. So we kind of have a convening voice, which is helpful when we get to the third initiative that we really want to do, which is to grow the ecosystem. So it's not just about attracting startups from outside the region, Kai being a great example of that, but it's also about developing our local talent right here in our own backyard. And it's from that pillar that my professional pride emerged this initiative called Ed Farm, Education Farm, Ed Farm for short, that we do in partnership with Apple. And we launched the pilot program back in 2019, and it's a digital skills and coding initiative. But the thing that we really wanted to make sure we were chipping away at was how do we make sure kids have access to the devices, but also curricula that inspires great learning experiences. How do we make sure that the young at heart also have pathways into technical career fields? And then we poured into the third pillar, which was teacher fellows. And it was a recognition that educators are pulled on and asked to do above and beyond with very little. And so we wanted to make sure, whether it was from a monetary financial perspective we were pouring into them, but we really lifted them up from a professional development and learning standpoint, and they were great. We flew them all across the nation so they could kind of see what other educators were doing that was on the forefront of this work. And from there, we started with 26. We have, I think, over 500 teacher fellows now in 4 states, and it's just an amazing opportunity for us to create the model that other cities could start to use when they ask themselves, what does the K-2 career pipeline look like? What does access look like? And there are so many other factors that we have to consider now, right? AI, just the future of work itself. The fact that we can now start early, we don't have to wait till a kid takes a summer class. We don't have to wait till they go to a better district. We have better districts right now. They just need the access and the tools to flourish in that environment.
Thank you, Deon. And I asked this question, Kai, I'll start with you, which is that CIS centers our work around 5 basic principles around closing the relationship gap, improving school climate, promoting health equity, and fostering college and career readiness, and inspiring civic engagement. How do we as organizations, you all representing the leaders of organizations as entrepreneurs and as creators of systems, come together to leverage technology in a way that supports students, families, and communities? So Kyle, I'll send that question to you, and I'll ask each of the panelists to respond as well.
Sure, and that's a great question. I think when we are advocating for access to this technology, we sometimes tend to overlook the infrastructure that's needed to support these technologies. And that's things like connectivity, Wi-Fi bandwidth, things like that. One of the reasons why KXR is able to work with so many different schools is because we are mobile first. You can use KXR on a smartphone, you can use it on a tablet, and a VR headset. And that small technical consideration helps others come off the sidelines so they can use advanced technologies. In addition to that, like I'm just saying, it's devices. When I was a teacher, my school had a bring your own device policy. So if a student had a smartphone or a tablet, we actually made students bring those devices to school, and that's how I taught. So it's rare that I go into a classroom and we're seeing a one-to-one device per student. So the devices are a huge issue that makes this challenging as well. And then really overlooked sometimes is the content. We may have the connectivity, we may have the devices, but we may have content that is not representative of the students that we serve. So they don't have an interest in a lot of these fields because they don't see anybody that looks like them. So I think when I'm advocating for how we can make those connections to the school, at home, and beyond, I'm really first making sure the essentials are there, the infrastructure. And the reason why I'm not in Birmingham today is because I'm in DC to lend my voice to advocate for increased connectivity on Capitol Hill. So just making sure that the work is being done locally and nationally to make sure that those resources are available for our students.
And I want to jump in. What you made me think about, Kai, is there's advocacy for our young people, especially in the CIS context, looks a little different. And I think what you talked about with building an infrastructure and building out a voice. And Sean, I'm going to come to you because you've got a background, and I think you're based in LA as well. CIS of LA has really been on the forefront of stepping out of what is traditionally our K-12 focus and thinking about advocacy, where they've really gone after the issue of broadband access. That's something that Kai has talked a little bit about, but I'm curious how you think about that question, the systems that you're building, and the way technology is interrupting some of that.
I think Kai did a perfect introduction to that question, because contextually we have to look at the realities, right? The realities are nationally 42 million people still don't have access to reliable high-speed internet in this country. In Alabama, that number is 1.3 million people who don't have access to reliable high-speed internet. So that means 1/4 of the population in Alabama doesn't have access to high-speed, high-quality internet. So the accessibility issue is huge. Our approach right now is awareness building. The awareness building is key. Tech is still very scary to a lot of people. It's very scary. Then you add in the layer of AI and the lack of regulation around that currently, and the data privacy issues that we're all dealing with. It's scary, but the truth is we have to demystify it by bringing awareness to the realities of technology. Technology isn't going anywhere. October the 30th, I believe, President Biden released an executive order on how to use AI. They're training the government on how to use AI. it's not going anywhere. So building awareness and demystifying it are key in any type of advocacy approaches that we take.
Well, just for a parking lot question, I'm going to come back to you on the AI and how you're seeing that leverage with families and students, but let me make sure to invite Deon into the conversation around how technology is being leveraged in the systems around families and communities and parents is making sense to you with Tech Birmingham.
Yeah, well, one, it's kind of hard to follow that. I mean, it really is a perfect summation, but one of the things that comes to mind is we have to be careful when we are coming up with policies, when we're doing advocacy work, and be mindful of who's at the table, all right, and make sure that we're doing things with the community and not to the community. And so something that we're starting to kind of pull on now is making sure students have not just access and the support that they rightfully need, but just that they have voice as well. And so we've started to convene, in essence, these roundtables, large roundtables, and a majority of this group is made up of early career or aspirational kids who aspire to be in technology. And that's one bucket, but in another bucket, we also have hiring partners, those who are doing the employing, and training providers as well. So whether that's a traditional 2-year, 4-year, or boot camp, they have a group as well. And so we segmented those intentionally because somebody who wishes to get in tech, or if that person is already in a job in technology, they might not be as comfortable as they would among their peers, kind of saying what the barriers and the challenges and the structures against them are if it is in front of their potential or current employer. And so we give them an opportunity and support them through stipends as well, right? We want to make sure that we're showing people we appreciate their time and their input and that we value them. And so at the end of those mini sessions, if you will, we come together and see where there's overlap so we can create joint strategies to start removing some of these barriers to technology. For instance, if a company is requiring you to have 5 years of Swift development, well, that's kind of egregious because Swift has barely been out for 5 years, right? And so we see some of these things that might be rooted in a legitimate reason, right? Obviously you want high quality candidates, but you also don't want to put up unreasonable barriers, right? And so we can bring everybody together and come up with strategies to start removing some of those barriers. And another thing that we're looking at is how do we evolve the next level of workforce access. Practically speaking, we had it as an initiative called Innovate Birmingham. That was designed to train about 1,925 opportunity youth on high demand IT jobs. And it was a smashing success, and like government does, successes were allowed to fall by the wayside. It was not funded. And so we are trying to convene people to figure out how we can institutionalize something like that, right? And so the kids, that's how old I am. Anybody who's below 40 is a kid to me, right? But these young adults and students, we're making sure that they're at the table as we are starting to think about this work that is going to include them. And what better way to kind of get their buy-in than to say they were a part of the formation of it as well.
Well, Deon, I'm going to come back to you because you're going to hopefully tell us a story and maybe explain to us what Swift is. I'm also way above my pay grade here when I think about some of the technology terms that we'd be using in this conversation. But also just, you've spoken to this, and I'll come back to you with a separate question around what happens when there is this synchrony of private philanthropy or foundation or corporation support like you described with Apple. So we'll come back to you on that question. But I want to go to Kai because I want to talk a little bit about her expertise and background in terms of some of the work she's been doing with her Kai XR technology. What it does, as I understand it, supports kids to take digital field trips and expands how they dream and imagine their futures. Kai, can you share any stories about the direct impact your technology has had on the Birmingham Schools program?
Of course. So like you were saying, when I started Kai XR, I wanted the technology to be used so students could reimagine and use their creativity to build worlds they wanted to see. I also wanted them to improve their 21st century skills such as critical thinking, collaboration, problem solving, and even innovation. I just didn't know it would happen that quickly. So in Birmingham City Schools, shout out to Southampton Academy and even Oxmoor Valley, where I worked with students who had learning challenges and they excelled on the platform using advanced technologies in ways their teachers had never seen before because the platform is differentiated and engages kids so differently. We had charter schools in Birmingham, like I3 Academy, where we saw kindergartners having a school-wide metaverse innovation challenge, where they were building their new worlds in the metaverse at 5 years old. I would have never thought that was a thing. That really stretched me in my thinking on who gets to build in the metaverse, and these kids did a fantastic job. Butch Hill STEAM Academy, they actually used their media space to create a VR music video after having exposure to KaiXR and learning about the metaverse. Would have never imagined that was a way they were going to take it. And most recently, I just came back from visiting WJ Christian Academy, where they did some research to realize that their restrooms had not been renovated since 1961, and the students took to the KaiXR makerspace to reimagine their restrooms, and they redesigned it in the metaverse and then presented those designs to administrators with a call to action to improve their facilities, using that in the metaverse. So for me, when I think about how students are using KaiXR in Birmingham City, it's really matter of fact to me that when you make these technologies accessible to all students, the entire community wins. And these students are just getting started. I can't wait to see what they make next.
Well, Kai, I feel a little old-fashioned because I'm a little afraid of the metaverse and I'm trying to make sense of it. But you're telling me it's not going anywhere and we might as well adapt and understand it, especially for young people who are not afraid of these components. So it sounds like you're right on the cutting edge of that. Let me go to, this is where I think it's going to get not only interesting and exciting, but maybe a little complex, Sean, when I ask you. So Innovate Public Schools, I understand and I know, as a sort of parent and power building organization. Can you share how generative AI is helping to activate family voices within the organizations you're working with?
Parent voice is the bedrock of any decisions that we make. We're very parent-centered. If for the academics in the room, we really operate from like a human-centered design where anything that we build, anything that we advocate for is parent-centered first. So how has generative AI come into play? Well, because parents brought it to us, we saw, I'll say our CEO, Michelle Vilches, discovered this opportunity by way of Northeastern University. There is an innovation lab called the Burns School of Social Change or something like that. I've provided resources so you all can access it. But through this social innovation lab, they created this fellowship. And in this fellowship, there's about 8 to 10 advocacy organizations. And we all came together for over a year to identify what social problems exist in our local communities. From that, we partnered with some technicians who were experts in the technology, and they helped us identify like what tool would make sense to leverage with AI. So as many of you know, COVID learning loss is real, and the impact of COVID learning loss on special education students, on Black students, on Pacific Islander students, on Latinx students is criminal, really. So with special education students in particular, there's something called the IEP. How many of you all have heard of an IEP? It's called, it's the acronym is for Individualized Education Plan. So we decided, because we work with a lot of immigrant families with kids with special needs, we decided to create an AI tool for the IEP. So what would it do? Essentially, it would translate the IEP into any language, and if you've seen an IEP document, it's like 40 pages. So it's already dense, super academic. We wanted to create a tool that would make it more accessible to families, particularly families with low literacy or low digital literacy, and be able to translate it, and not only translate it, but identify strategies that parents can do with their kids, like project-based learning strategies and things like that, that the IEP might not identify, but exist.
I think it's just absolutely exciting to think about. We're just scratching the surface of filling some gaps where AI can be doing a lot of the legwork. In the IEP example that I was reading in advance, and the work that Innovate Public Schools is doing to put that in the hands of parents who I know are probably afraid of that. So I'm curious, if, as a follow-up, how has that, you said that they brought it to you.
They did.
And that's something that I'm just curious about.
I think the AI revolution that started back in November of last year kind of took everybody by storm, and just the thought of essentially having access to any expertise and being able to type a question in and it'll tell you how to make curry and give you every ingredient and tell you what part of the world that style of curry comes from. Like, that level of accessibility had never existed prior to AI. So I think it was exciting not only for parents but for us to have access to that kind of information, and then really figure out how do we leverage that information with community need, and really form solutions that are driven by the needs of their community, because I think that's essential. Every community has different needs. So leveraging AI for the needs of individual communities is game changing, really. It's scary. It's scary as hell, actually. But the reality is it's not going anywhere, so we either wait until somebody else makes the rules, or we get to sit in a seat that we've never sat in any other time in history and be the creators as well as the consumers.
Exciting that you're at the forefront of that, sitting at that table, Sean. Let me turn to you here, Deon. You've talked to us a little bit about how to build a better pipeline, thinking about generative AI, how that takes the complicated, takes the dense, and makes it simple. I think what you all have tried to do at TechBirmingham is make sometimes the complicated path to get into tech more simple or accessible. So can you share how, or for young people, how is it that you're working to secure jobs or internships to create careers within technology here in Birmingham, and how that might be translatable to other communities?
Yeah, no, totally. Well, we kind of touched on it earlier, right? Just making sure that we are sharing with them that we want them at the table, right? We need them at the table if we're going to build something that is for them, that is responsive for them. And so this is more so on a macro level, just in terms of the actual technologies that we're using and how they're being deployed. I mean, again, like I said, generative AI, I can't even imagine what is going to happen. Like, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Right, but honestly, I got to give props to you. It's important that we make sure that those kids are exposed to it, and we don't want to keep them away from it for fear of whatever, fear of the unknown, fear of how they're going to use this, because that puts them at a disadvantage if they're not comfortable with it. They're already using it. We might as well empower them and make sure that they're good digital citizens so that they can leverage this in powerful ways. I'm thinking about the cybersecurity implications of it. Folks are already using AI in malicious ways, being able to come up with these social engineering schemes because all of the information is already online, right? And so literally people are creating these AI agents that are having conversations as if they were me or you. They're impersonating people because they've pulled this composite together. Well, it's probably the time right now that we put these kids in front of these tools so that they're comfortable with it, so that they can then come up with these ideas and strategies and methods to fight against that stuff, right? And I tell folks, we talk a lot about programming and coding. I don't want for every kid to be a programmer or a coder. That's unreasonable, for one thing. We just want to make sure that they have proper access and exposure so that they know how what it is they truly want to do can be impacted and leveraged through technology. So for instance, if somebody loves writing, well, if you go to a website, what is on that website? Copy, content. If you love videography, well, a lot of apps use videos. And so there's a way to take all of these skills and all of these interests and passions. We just need to make sure that we're doing a better job of showing them how this relates to technology, because now we're not talking about technology as a vertical, it is truly horizontal. If you are in banking, you are in fintech, or you will be disrupted by fintech. If you are in housing, well, agents now are, again, they're creating these AI agents that could go through the process. And so you don't need a broker, you don't need a real estate agent, because we're coming up with, you're going to be disrupted by it, you're going to be impacted in one way or the other. And so the earlier we can get kids exposed to this with the proper safety and guidelines in place to make sure that they're good digital citizens, the better. That's really the approach that we're taking with a lot of these initiatives, right? Whether it's in Ed Farm in our work in 7th and 8th grade, whether it is the early career talent and making sure that they're telling us that they feel empowered and comfortable to tell us what the barriers are so that we can then come up with strategies to mitigate those issues. And then just working across the entire landscape from a policy all the way down to the grassroots level. Those are the things that we're really trying to bring together.
Thank you. Well, I've got just one more question, and I'll go to Kai on this, but you've already jumped into this here, Deon, which is the idea that today up on the table, or up on the stage, we're having a unconventional, non-traditional conversation around tech, namely because of the people who are here at the table, which are people of color, black leadership who has been entrepreneurs going into tech space. And Kai, I'd like to go with you on this and ask you one, just a brief question, which is, was this the design from the beginning for you? And if it was, if it wasn't, what would you do? What would you say about ensuring that there are more black, brown, and leaders of color who are in technology?
Sure. Was this the design that I started with? I feel like that's a trick question. Yes and no. I always wanted to build a platform that took students off the sideline and use mobile technology to really unleash their potential. I always wanted to do metaverse technologies and virtual field trips, so we got it to exactly where I wanted it to be. The path was very different than I expected, but the end goal of really helping students with these technologies just still blows my mind. As a teacher, I can't even describe the feeling to see other educators and students use the platform. Now, if we're talking about how to get others to build their own tech and how to make more entrepreneurs of color, we're making progress, but we have a really long way to go. Deon just talked about, he doesn't want everybody to be a coder and things like that. You don't have to be a coder. I was told that as a teacher with no tech background that I could not do this, I shouldn't do this, and I was crazy. I was told that by my loved ones, my friends, my colleagues, and I was told it even more loudly by a denial of resources. I recently had a talk with one of my investors level setting that a lot of the rules that I get from my investors are basically rules for white men. And I have to level set and advocate for myself as to why that will never be the case for me. So I was telling him that my competitors have raised $50 million, where meanwhile I'm something like the 100 black women to ever break $1 million in venture capital. And that's a terrible stat to have. We're talking from the times of Madam C.J. Walker to me, right? That's how many black women have been afforded the opportunity to really take their dreams and dream that they can make a difference. So I told my investor that this journey has told me who's allowed to dream and who cannot dream. And even with that, I'm still expected to hit the same milestones as my competitors, except for my milestones have moving goalposts. So I really hope and pray that by making this platform, students learn at a very young age what it means to try, to fail, to think critically, to problem solve. I hope that I love to see all the incubators popping up in Birmingham and beyond. I was just having a conversation, I think it's called Hardware Park, where people can start to build their own hardware. The tech saying is hardware is hard, don't do it. And I think that's a terrible thing to tell people if they really want to bring their invention to the world. And I'm looking forward to seeing what's happening, and I know that I'm playing a part in cultivating the next generation of innovators, but it really takes conditioning their minds at a young age. They can do this, and having communities where, maybe being crazy and having these big ideas isn't a bad thing. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that looks like.
Sean, I'm going to go to you again with this question around how do we get more people of color around the technology table, but I also want to just do a quick programming note. We have time for maybe one or two questions, and I'd love for you all to open it up. And Sean, let me go to you, and then we'll go to a question from the audience.
Repeat the question for me.
So I think Deon has touched on this, Kai has touched on this, but you're in a space where you've got a lot of parent power organizing at your back. And the idea of getting more people of color at the tech table, interacting with it, engaging it, building the future of it. How is it that you're ensuring or thinking about ensuring that folks continue to have a seat at that table?
Well, I think going back to the innovation lab that we're working with, it's called the Equitable Engagement Lab, and again, it's through Northeastern. Identifying opportunities like that to essentially create pathways of parents parents and communities to understand the tech of it all is really the game changer. Stuff isn't as complicated as we think it is. Now, when we get into the coding and the engineering of it, yeah, it's complex. But understanding the basics of how to use it, how to leverage it for solutions, that's really training. And there are tons, all you have to do is get on Google. There are tons of free certifications to help people understand how to do prompt engineering, understanding how to use Canva and AI. Just there are so many tools. So I think identifying programs that can lower that barrier of entry for families to help them understand the tech as it relates to solutions that they're dealing with in local communities, as well as doing the professional development that we all have to do anyway, to learn prompt engineering, to learn these things to help people understand the tech of it all.
Thank you. We've got at least one hand that I've seen up if you want to shoot a question our way.
How you doing today, panel? My name is Lawrence Samadeli, and this for you, Deon. What I do want to ask you is, where do you see Air Farm in the next couple of years?
I serve as a strategic advisor now, so I got to give a shout out to my brother Wayman Jackson, who now leads the organization. We incubated it in TechBirmingham, spun it out as a separate organization, and then from that, kind of answering your question, another signature initiative called Propel came out of Ed Farm, and that is intended to connect all 100 plus HBCUs, and in the same way that we pour it into educators, make sure that we're also pouring into them within the higher education landscape as well. And entrepreneurship, funny enough, is going to be a critical piece of that. So Ed Farm, I mean, I think we have a great model. We kind of figured out the kinks here in Birmingham, if you will. Like I said, we're in 4 states now, growing like gangbusters. Alpo has continued their support, as a number of other organizations have. So I think it's just really solidifying that model and figuring out how we take that across the national landscape. And one thing I will say also from the entrepreneurial standpoint, just doing what you did, right? Showing up at the schools and then providing those opportunities, because the power of representation cannot be understated enough, right? Just being able to see somebody that looks like us doing this, proximate to the work. And that's kind of one of the things that I really take away from my childhood, is that I was always fascinated with computers and technology, but I did not have anybody steering me intentionally toward a direction. But if I was on the football field slinging that rock 50 yards, there's an entire apparatus that would have swarmed me, right? Like, we need to work on his footwork and his mechanics. We need to get him a mentor. We need all of these things, get him in the film room, right? And so that's what we're trying to build through Ed Farm, making sure that we have that entire apparatus, that culture that swarms individuals who show an interest. You don't have to be a professional at it, just show an interest, and that's enough for us to work with.
So Kai, I've used your platform before. I know you face a lot of trials and tribulations, and just going through those trials and tribulations, what was your reason to keep going?
I love the quote that those who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. So I just thought that we weren't asking the right people. So when it comes down to what does education need, I could talk to a million teachers, and they have very good expertise as subject matter experts of what's happening. So even with as challenging as it's been, I know what it can look like. I also firmly believe that if it swings in one direction, it can also swing very much in the other direction. So, and then students are so bright. I have no doubts of what the future will hold because of these students. So I think from my own students I've taught, my own family, they are always my motivation to keep going. And the last thing I'll say is this journey is, they tell you it's going to be hard. So you know what you're signing up for when you get into it. And I think a lot of the challenges I've experienced helped me build up my grit so I could do this. So I wake up and I eat no's for breakfast. I have a goal. It may take a year to hit that goal. And it's just that type of endurance that I learned from the hardships that I've endured over my life too.
Give it up for Kai. And a team, if you please can, give it up for this panel, for Sean, Deon, Kai, for their vision, for eating no for breakfast, and the leadership that it takes to come into this space and to create a path for many, many more to come. Thank you so much.